With Command Solutions. I'm going to go over version 5.0 of the ComStat dashboard. What I'm going to do is talk about each of these tabs, where they come from, what they compare, what the searches are for them, and then we're going to talk about the setup over here on the dashboard. Uh, this probably be a little bit of a long video, and so in the description down below I'll put chapters, so there'll be different chapters you can click on and skip right to it. If you have a question about the evidence tab, you should be able to just click on it and then skip right to it. So the first one up is incidents, and the dashboard pretty well counts most of these things in the same way, in that it just a matter of where it's getting the information from. When you talk about incidents, we're talking about the dashboard and counting one offense code per law incident. So it's a lot like a UCR. And so for this button, crime is counted as one incident, one victim, the most severe crime. And so for an overview of crime, I think that's a better way to look at what's happening in a community. And so therefore we have a button that'll count just like that. And it'll also give you crime index information, crime rates down at the bottom. So if you have all your part 1 crimes in here, it'll count up the number of them and percentage per thousand. So it'll give you a little crime index also. On the incident tab, the top major categories are locations to put stuff. So they're pages. We call them major categories here, but inside of these containers are smaller groups of offense codes. So right now we're looking at this part 1 here. Part 1, you can see it up here. And if you look at what's inside that, you'll see that there's the regular part 1 crimes: aggravated assault, homicide, rape, larceny, theft, and vehicle theft. So if you wanted to look at the crimes against property, then you would just drop down and look at crimes property. And it would bring up the burglaries, the vandalisms, arson, and crimes that are considered crimes against property. This top panel can be called anything you would like. You can name different things in here. You could have a media, you could have an SRO, you could have a major crime, violent crime, crimes that are concerned of the community crimes, or whatever you would like up there, because the number of containers, or the number of categories that you have, is unlimited. It would just scroll across like it does when you look at maybe part 2s or something. This would just keep scrolling for as many number of the categories that you had. On the left side here, you see the department information. You can change that. You can put your badge here. You can put, if you have a favorite saying for your agency, you can put it here. The chief's name or whatever you would like here. Over here are the other tabs across the top. It just gives you a quick glance on whether they're up or down. This button is the date ranges. These are system date ranges up here, and these are ranges that people have, that users have set up. So you can have 3 different kinds. You can just have a comparison of days, like this one does here. It compares 2 periods only, like 30 days compared to 30 days here. Or you can have it compare multiple periods. In this case, we're doing 3 30-day periods, or 4 15-day periods, whatever it is. The dashboard you can put in as high as 24, so you could have 24 different date ranges. So for example, if you put in 15 days and made it to the period number 24, you get 24 graphs in every one of these across the top. And you'd be able to tell here what they were. In addition, the dashboard will do different time frames. So if you wanted to know information about Memorial Day, or if you want to know information about New Year's Eve or the rodeo, or whatever it is in your community that you would like more information on, you could set up a date range for that period. And you could put in every one of them going back 24 years in theory. So if you want to look at the past 10 year quarters for the dashboard first quarter, second quarter, you could put that in here and you could see all the data across here. Over here, locations. Location that is available within your jurisdiction in TB zones is where it's at. You come up here and you can create a location. You can add them together, or you can make one of them, or whatever you would like. In addition to the locations, you can set up a default. So if this page you want to come up all the time, then you just click default. The idea of the dashboard is to keep drilling in further and further to look at information. So if you're over here and you want to look at Part 1 crimes, this will give you Part 1 crimes. Now you look at it and you want to look more at the residential burglaries or any of these categories. They're listed down here at the bottom. So let's say burglary residential. So you keep drilling into the next page. Now it will show you all the offense code that make up that one group. So we're looking at burglary residential, forced entry, non-forced entry, unlawful entry, attempted forced entries. And it gives you the numbers here, then the actual cases here. In this case, there's 121 of them. You can change this view. Let's, for example, if you just wanted to look at forced entry burglaries, you just click there and update the view. And that particular offense code that makes that one up would come up by itself. From here you can reset the view, you can update it again, you can also do some searches down here at the bottom. I'll reset the view. And down here at the bottom you can now look at what's the clearance code of a 12, or give me everything that Officer Tibbetts has done, or by address, or by location, or by date of the week. You can also export this information over to Excel from here. In this case, we're only looking at 10 of the records, and we got 121 of them, so you'd want to increase this here. Now, as I said before, the idea is you keep drilling in. So you drill into the next one. It'll show you day of the week. It's come up for the past how many periods. In this case, 15 days times 4. So these are 4 periods on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It'll also show you time of the day. And then again, down here you can do searches here. If anything you see in red, you can click on. Now this can be turned off. This is part of the narrative. So you can turn that off if you don't want people looking at the narrative. Again, you can search information on it. Once you go to this point, either you can do a finer search on it. You can drill in further. Start looking at the different periods. You can look at split time on your incidents. You can look at the officers, the locations, and each period. You can also do a threshold if you wish. You have to have more than a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, but you can do a threshold. In threshold settings, you put values on different years of data, and you can see whether it's going up the way it should be, or if you've got a problem where the increase is more than what it should be. And in that case, it would highlight them in red, and so that you could look at that and go, oh, these are crime's going to increase maybe, but we expect it to increase so much, or a little bit at a time. But you put in your values on the and then refresh it, and it'll give you threshold settings. The mapping is available a couple of levels up, so you could map residential or any of these, and it wouldn't matter. And now when you see this mapping icon, if you click that, it'll export all this to a KMZ file, and it'll map them. And so you have to have Google Earth installed on each individual computer in order to get that to work. And what happens is when you click on it, it'll open up Google Earth for your jurisdiction, It'll give you a heat map, and it'll also give you a pin map. This is going to have 121 points on it, so it, you know, might look pretty cluttered. Depending on what icons you use is what you'll get up here. You can see these icons are all the same on them. If we would change the icons, and you would be able to look at it. You can see here also that I've set up polygons, different ones here. As you look up here, you can look at the different polygons. So as you drilled in, you could turn off things like the heat map, so it wasn't as cluttered. And then you could go in and look at things a little closer, and look at different polygons you'd set up. But there's another video on that, so I'm not going to go into it all that much. Don't save it. If you save it, it'd be there next time for you, and you could add other stuff to it. So remember, that's incidents. It depends on it is only looking for one offense code, and it's looking for the most severe offense code. So if you're looking at a law incident here, this is an old law incident for those. You see the offense codes here. It looks through all of them and looks for the highest UCR if it's set up that way. And I'll show you can set up a little different, but that's what it's looking for. I mean, if you, let's say you had the aggravated assault and the domestic assault and possession of drugs and vandalism, and they had listed the aggravated assault back here in number 41, this dashboard will look through all of them, find the most severe, and then report it on it, or bring it up. So that's how that one works. The next one we're going to talk about is offense codes tab, this tab up here. The offense codes, when you click on it, shows a little bit different. It counts a little bit different. Like we were showing you on the law incident, it's going to count all of them. In that same example, when you talked about the aggravated assault, the drugs and the vandalism, things like that, it's going to search all those fields for whatever you're searching for. But as far as the general layout here, it's the same. I mean, you have these major categories up here. You can create and add things to it. In this case, we're calling them Part A, Part B, drugs, narcotics, domestic, and you switch them here. Drugs, narcotics will come up. The offense tab is similar to the incident tab. It has the major categories up above that you go to set up and put whatever you want in it, whatever offense codes you would like. But the difference is it's going to search all the offense tables, looking for what you have set up in these containers. So in this one we have drugs set up. It has marijuana, all drugs, cocaine, and synthetics. So if we were to go to one that had group A, it would have the same type of thing as burglaries and thefts and other things right here. So the offense, same, you start drilling into them just like you would on the other dashboard, and you can map it and drill into individual offenses from here. Then you can look at individual information on them. So just remember the difference between these two is this only counts the most severe. This would count if you had a narcotics charge and a burglary and an aggravated assault. You could, on one incident, you could see the same incident listed here more than once, because it's taken an offense for, if you were looking for drugs and aggravated assault on the same group, you would see them in here. Or on the nature tab comes off of the nature field on the law incident. So when you look at a law incident, it comes off this field number 2, and that's the only thing it looks at. So that comes right out of dispatch. Some people look at the nature tab and say, well, it's not dependable, but it is useful. You may not have offense codes down here for all the incidents. Maybe you have community policing as a nature, or public talks, or you have traffic stops, but you don't give them an offense code. So you can still track them under nature. But you also have that situation where you have The person calls in, the neighbor, hey, my neighbor's meeting, somebody's breaking in my neighbor's house, it's a burglary, and they get there and it's the neighbor crawling through the window or something. So it's really a citizen assist, and you may not change the nature because you want to show what dispatch received and why the officers responded the way they did. They're responding to a burglary in progress, and so you change the offense code, but you don't change the nature. So that's the nature. Same thing. There's no major categories up here because you can just create as many as you want. You can create anything you want in here. Some people put accidents up here because they don't have the accident uh, table module from Spillman, so they'll track them in law incident. Again, the same thing. You can see all the other tabs over here. It's got locations. It's got the same date ranges available to all of them. Statutes. Spillman has combined the offense and the statute table. On this page, you can create a dashboard by the statute. So if you give a burglary 466106.212, you can actually create a dashboard from just the statutes. Citations. Citations comes off CT main and the citation table. It can be tracked. There's a couple ways to track them in the dashboard. You can track them by the type. So if you don't want to know moving, non-moving, or that sort of thing, then you can look at them that way, or you can look at them at the statute or the offense code. What were they written for? This is a page showing them broken up by statute or the offense code. They're looking at them by restraint devices and speeding. And so if you look at from here, it's the same as the other dashboard. You drill in basic speeds, the biggest one, down to speeding violation 0.1, and you can see it down here too. 131 basic speeds. You can then click on here, and you can go in and do some different things. You can search on, well, uh, what's this offense code? You want them to write certain speeds or certain information, so you can see the day of the week, time periods, things like that, totaled by race and by the periods. You can also break it down by race if you wish. So if you click on that, it'll show you the number of tickets by the race or number of locations. If you're going to give a talk to the northeast side, and they're going to ask about, well, there's a lot of speeders or something, you can also run your dashboard by a location here. Again, you can also map your citations, or you can do a little more information on them and see some trending information, day of the week, record locations, things like that for each period on it. There is no setup on accidents, but you have to have main in order to use it. So if you click on accidents, it automatically comes up. It gives you the type of accidents. It'll give you the number, give you the injured, the killed, the total damage. If you track it, of course, it's got to be in there. And also, it'll give you the top streets and how many of them are on what intersection on them. When you go into an accident, let's go into injury accidents here. It'll give you a little more trending information, some more the raw data down at the bottom. But also, if you are tracking the causations, it'll give you a causation button. This is right off of the AC main or the accident module from Spillman. There's a place for causations, and you can then come in here and say, well, how many for what? So distracted driving, you can look at them down here. You look at them by accidents over time, accidents by the day, by the street summary. For this one, you could go back to all causes, and here's the street summary for all causes. Again, date's the same, trending information and mapping. roll call. The roll call button is there to for individuals to use when they're going into a roll call. So if they want to make a dashboard and show it to a group of guys going out on the road, and you want them to look at burglary businesses or property watches or vehicle burglaries, whatever you put in there, uh, they can open up a dashboard and discuss it. They don't have to worry about this other stuff. They can just look at roll call. They can map it, bring it up on a map and show everybody. They could print it out. They can do a lot of things with it and take it into roll call with them. So this is more for the commander or the sergeant going on roll call. It's set up by admins or by whoever has access to it. They can set it up and present their own roll call tab. The dashboard can be set up the manager will set defaults, but once a user gets in there, they can set their own dashboard up however they would want, or they can accept the defaults by what the manager put in. Evidence button tracks the evidence, has to be set up. So circumstances tracks the circumstance codes. Let's put some in there real quick so you can see that. We'll just put in bias. Agencies have used it for count homeless calls, or transient calls, or officer use of force. It's like all the other dashboards. I just say it. Now we'll click on it and see what comes up. Now this will show you bias. Using your circumstances, it's a great page. You can show school calls. So inside of on your incident, if you're marking down all the calls that come in that have anything to do with your schools, it'll track them, track a number of things. And circumstance, people make up a lot of different ones. So what we've covered here is all the tabs at the top. We've covered drilling in to the different ones. We've covered the date range. You have the system dates and others you can create, and how to see what they are, locations, and mapping. Now we're going to go into each of these through the setup tab and see how to set them up and make them your own, and how to make and what each of the buttons and how you can make the categories in the major pages. Next chapter here under setup. Thank you. We're going to now talk about the setup of the dashboard. This is where all the tabs, all the locations, all the dates, the department summary and everything is set inside the dashboard. The dashboard can be set up individually by individual users. They can put in most everything. They can set up their own incidents, offenses, any of these tabs up here. They can create their own dates, but they cannot create their own locations, and the manager must also load defaults and set up users. Other than that, just a user can really set up any of these major categories or any of the other things that the manager can do. So let's go into setup, and the first page that always comes up is application settings. It has the general tab, users, dates, locations, and mapping. Under general, you have the sidebar summary. So what that is the information that's contained in the sidebar where the badge or the logo of the department goes right here. This is the department summary over here. So you can put in your badge here, and you can put in information about your department here. Over here, this is where you do it. It's free text. The population's used to figure out the crime index, so you want to be fairly accurate of what your jurisdictional population is. And then this is again just free text, you know, to serve and protect, reduce crime, you know, confidence in what citizens, whatever it is. Narrative over here has these 4 choices. 1, the narrative's not visible with anyone. All users, internal only, or manager only. Internal only is usually law enforcement officers, and what that affects is over here. We'll drill into one of them here. So you go to to some category. In this case, we're drilled into burglary. When the burglaries come up, we'll pick one of those categories. Again, let's say this one here. And if it's in red here, that means you can go one step further. And so that narrative turn off and on is where this is at here. So it turns this off so you can't see it. That's what that button's for. Also, if you go back a couple of steps here, this is the detailed information of a law incident here, what we call raw data. So back over on setup, you've got who can see the narrative. Internal only is usually how it's set. You have display raw data. If we took that box off, that information above on the incidents would be turned off. So you wouldn't be able to see any of the detail on the incident. The load data, if you're an older Spillman user and you have a couple of years worth of data in there, you can set this back to get some historical data. So you could go back and effectively decide that you want to capture everything from September 1st, 2005. The other thing is this raw stamp showed the timestamp on the raw data. If that's checked, it gives you a timestamp with that raw data we were just showing. So be sure to save your changes to update this information. Next button is user. I'm going to delete this user here and create a new user. We'll call it test2. You give them a password, which they'll have to change when they log in. Confirm it, and then decide if they're external, internal, or manager. And depending on what you give them, depends on their access to the dashboard. You don't want to have too many managers because they're setting defaults, which we'll show you in a minute, and global settings. And so you probably only have one, maybe two that are working together. Internal can be most anybody in the police department. External doesn't even have this setup button. But you may want to give the dashboard to some external people. It might be a crime commission, a mayor, whatever it is. But you can create them a dashboard, make them an external user, and then they can't change anything. What you really would do is create the user, set it all up how you wanted it, then go back and change them to external so you could work with them while you were creating them. You'll add this new user, and there we have test2. If you want to delete any users, you can delete them right over here. But if you, let's say you have another user come in, it's going to be doing the same function, a crime analyst or something. You may just go in and change the name of the person, then you don't have to set them up again. They can assume the other user's setup. So from here, the user's been created. And like I say, you create as many as you would like. Departments will create groups of users like sergeants, or they'll create groups of, or give individuals the ability to create their own dashboard. If you have a person that shows an interest in a dashboard, you might as well let them go after it. They can only change those settings that they are using as an internal user. The next one is dates. Here's all the dates that are currently set up in this dashboard. You can move them up and down so that they'll come up on these lists on the up here closer to the top. You can look at just some of them. Some agencies have a large number of these, so they'll want to look at maybe just the range of days, or maybe they'll just want to look at periodic date ranges. A periodic date range, the difference is the system date range are with it all the time. That's what every one of these comes default. So it always has a year to date, month to date, previous month, and previous 24 hours on it. The next one is periodic dates, and what that is two date periods compared together. So like in this period, we have period 1 cruise in 2009 and 2018 to 2019. And so what you do is you put in date ranges for events that are occurring in your jurisdiction that affect you. Maybe it's 4th of July, Memorial Day, whatever it is you have in your community, a rodeo or something. You can put in up to 24 different periods. So you could go back several years and just show the 4th of July activities, or you could go back several years and just show quarters. Quarter 1, 2017, you know, 2018, 2019, 2000, and so forth. And so this is where you would give them a title and set them up as a periodic date range. So over here again, I'm going to delete out a couple of these. If you get date ranges in here you no longer want, you just delete them. We'll create a couple more. Here's going to be a periodic date range, the group titles, to give you some sort of, this could be called ComStat or anything you want it. We'll call it times 7. So what we're going to do is make this period one that has 7 different periods in it. That's why I named it this. If it was just going to be a regular comparison, you just put in 7 days and it would just compare 2 time frames. So here you have the range. This is what kind it is. Enable time settings. If you click that, another page comes up, and so you can make it by shift. So maybe this would be 0600 to 1800 hours or something for a shift. And that way you would only gather details for this number of days for this period of time. But we don't. Days in the period. So if you'd named this ComStat, the days in the period would be 7. And the number of periods would be 7. Well, let's back that down. Let's put 4 and create the date range. So here's your 7 days here. We just created it. And what that's going to do is do 7 times 7 day periods. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no data in for the others in this demo we have here. So all the others in there, you can check them out here. You can go to cruise in, click on that if you want, and see what's being tracked under that date range. Different things like that. You can create one range, so you just want to know what happened the last 30 days. And you also again have your want to create a periodic date. What you do is you label the top title, like July 4th or 7 years of Memorial Day. Then over here, this one might be Memorial Day 2014. Then you put the start date and the end date, and then you would create the date. Then you would go back in and modify this one, it'd be the same group title, but this one might be 2015, then 2016, 17, 18, and so you build up this chart that you want with periodic date ranges. The other thing is, once you get all your date ranges set up, you can then assign them to different users. Now here's test 2. They don't have any date ranges on them because I just set them up. There's none there. So let's go back to the manager, which is me. So if I want to keep these and I want them in the memory of the computer, if I click this, I set them in the memory and it overwrites all the others right here. So now when I go back over to that new user, if I want them just to have this, all the dates that I do, I can load the defaults. And now they have them. But let's say this individual is really not interested in some of these, so they delete them out. They can't delete the system ones out. They could then go back in and they could create their own date ranges. This is user 2, remember, that's why it warns you there. So you could say the chief wanted a particular one created, 22-day one. And now you give them a range, make it the period of days you want it, and we'll just say it's for the last 22 days and create it. And now there it is right there. This is only for this user. It doesn't affect any other user. So if I load the defaults, it's going to overwrite everything they have here, including the ones we deleted. It'll bring them all back like that. So that's the date range. Set up as many as you'd like. Individuals set up their own. It uses full days only. So if you are comparing 24 hours and today's the 15th of the month, it's going to look at the 13th and the 14th. You won't get any 15th because it's not a full 24 hours. Location, all locations in your TV zone will be available. Whatever's in the bottom, you move it to the top, give it a name, and it creates a location. You can have more than one area in your group up here. In other words, you could create a location out of 2 districts in the north and call it north, or you can create whatever you want. You put as many as you want in there. This one only has one, but you could come down here and say, well, I want to put these in there also and call it, that's also the west side. You can put them up there. Mapping, we set up the mapping. There's not a lot of setup to do with that. When we do the install, it'll be, we'll get the map working. It has restrictions when you're looking at accidents and citations, because if you have 400 citations up and you hit the map button, it's just going to fill in your whole map. Mapping method, this is determined by setup in your Spillman and your Flex. Time, if you want to know more about timestamp and time span, you should read up on them. And what it basically does is create animation on the date ranges. So you can map 6 months worth of burglaries, and you can say, I want to turn them on and off. I want them to stay on for 2 weeks and then turn off, and a new one come on for the next 2 weeks, and it'll look as though it's moving. This is your heat map. Turn it on and off. Usually it's on. You really don't want the names on there. It takes up too much space, and so you'd hit save your information. So that is under Setup, Application Settings, the general user dates, location, and mapping information. The next one is the incident settings. These correspond to each of these buttons. So incidents to incidents, offenses, nature, statute, all the way down to officer, which we'll cover in a separate video, but circumstances. Once you know how to set up one of these and the philosophy behind it and the theory behind it, you'll be able to set them all up fairly easily. They have a little bit of different stuff in them and how they look at things. Now remember, the incident group is the one that looks at only one offense code, the most severe. So first you have to decide, well, how do you really want it to look at? Do you want to use existing offense, observe, replace offense observed with sequence 1, or use the highest UCR? And that's usually where they leave it. You can enable this as the manager for everyone, or you can disable it. When you disable it, the button goes away. You didn't change anything, it just isn't shown anymore. So we'll bring it back. There it is. Or as a user, you can turn it off and on too. The big part is under incident groups. Here's all the incident group and their pages. So remember, we had major categories. We had crime against property, part 1, quality of life, SRO. So these are the main pages here, and these are the categories that are in them. So if we went over to crimes property, we would see these 6 different crimes in there under the incident setting right here, which is the one we're on. So we'll go over to the incidents. We'll come over here, look at crimes against crimes property, and here they are here. Here's the major pages, SRO, property, quality of life, part 1, part 2, and then to get to the individual ones, you come down here and click on them. So back in setup, we're working on the incident page, incident settings, and incident groups. In order to get additional parent groups or major groups, you click this button, or to delete or modify them. Now here's the ones we have, and here it says whether you want it to calculate the crime rate on that group or not. But if you wanted to add a new one, let's say that we wanted to add a ComStat meeting made page, and we'd save it. Now we've created a new parent group to put things in it. And in this ComStat meeting, for example, let's say that you wanted to create, put things in there that you were going to talk about, maybe the burglaries, the vehicle burglaries, different things like that. You had a group of them that was just for that meeting. It may include, all kinds of things. Maybe it's vandalisms or DUIs or whatever it is that you're going to talk about that week, you'd put in that group. Or it could be violent crime, it could be sexual assaults, it could be domestics, it could be anything you wanted, but we created one called ComStat. So now we're going to create an incident group. And here we would gather things we wanted to move up. For instance, whatever it is you want to track, you would move to the top. Burglaries, whatever it is. Do you want to make a drug one? Move to the top. And all these offense codes right here are what's going to be tracked. So we want to put it in our ComStat meeting. You want to give it an icon of some sort. ComStat, and this will be, we'll name it same thing. It has a really good filter on it. So let's say you wanted to add DUI. So you'd move it up there. Oops. Move them up. You would save changes. Now when we come back over on the list, you'll see ComStat has one thing in it. The group ComStat had in this meeting. So let's create another and we'll call it drugs. We'll put it in ComStat. Yeah, we'll make one for drugs. So you look on your thing and say under controlled substance, and there it is. So you click on the top one and click on the bottom one. Or you could command click and bring more in. Or you could shift click. Save changes. Now you go back over there, we got two of them in here, and here's what it looks like over here. Incidents. And now we have our ComStat meeting. I have a whole bunch of stuff here, and then it'll have drugs. And drugs looks like as you drill into it. Here they all are. And from here you could keep drilling into it and say, well, I want more information on marijuana or synthetics or drug equipment, whatever you put in there, and it'll show you more information. You can trend it or map it or do whatever you'd like with it. So under setup, we're talking about incident settings. We could change these things. We went to incident groups. We edited the parent groups. We created a new one, and that gave us these two up here. We can now, when you go to a new user, they don't have anything in there. It's waiting for them to set it up or for you to load the defaults. Let's go back to the manager. Now with this new stuff, you got to be sure to say, well, I want to set it into memory. This is what we want for everybody if they want it. So you set it into memory. Now when I go to that new user and I load the default groups, they're going to have the new stuff there for them. So that's basically how you set up all these categories. Whatever's in the bottom, if you move it to the top, give it an icon and a title, pick a page for it to go in that you've set up, and click Save, that user or you as the manager is now going to have that. It's going to have that category set up inside your dashboard. The filtering button is the filtering button set up here remains not active, but you can save it. If you set it up on the fly while you're over in the dashboard, it will disappear as soon as you leave. So first you pick any of the columns that are on the law incident. You can say, well, day of week equal to Monday, and responsible officer equal to Smith, and with a circumstance equal to firearm used. And you create this filter after you give it a name. You can now access this filter anywhere in the dashboard. So you could create one to look at days of the week, times of the week, different circumstances, whatever you wanted to. It's not quite as important as it was because in the raw details you can search at the top of each column now and it makes it pretty quick. So that's incidents. Incident groups, filtering. Like I said, once you set one up, the others look very similar. Tabs, same way, filtering and groups. Here's the groups, the parent groups that have been set up. You'll notice test 2 doesn't have anything set up, so you would load the defaults for that test 2 user, and now they would have them. You would create the same way because it's from the same place. It's you'd want to watch this so you're not in there creating them as test 2, but as Randy or the manager, whoever that is. Come down here, pick what you're looking for. Maybe top check that one, and then go to the bottom one and shift click it, move it up, give it a category, give it a name, and decide what container, major category, or page. Oh, you can't have two the same, so if you're doing, put something else behind them. Drop it into it and save the changes, and you'd have these offense code now listed under this button, the offense group, under burglary 2. And then the filter's the same. Let's go to natures next. We won't save that one. Now remember, natures are different themselves. That comes off the nature tab, so you can have broad categories here. Same way. This one does not have a parent group. You can just create as many as you want, and it will just keep going and going. So you could come over here and create a new one, and maybe this one's going to be for alarms. Well, you have an alarm that has these in it. So let's go back over. Let's create one for drugs or something. Usually they create these for things that don't have offense codes. So let's say you just want to look at hit and run accidents. That's it. You don't have an offense code, so you need to get them out of natures. Hit and run accidents only. And you could give them some sort of icon. The icons are helpful when you map them, so you should give them something a little unique. And we have accidents. Now we have hit and run accidents. Over on natures, we just created this category. Accidents, hit and run accidents, right there. On some of these, you'll see this drop down stiff. It'll give you natures or offenses or any of them by hour or by day. Okay, now that is natures. The next setup button is the statutes. The statutes is located up here on the tab. You set it up by using this one under the setup menu. You can enable the tab up here for everyone, or you can disable it for everyone, or a single user can decide they don't want to see it. It just hides the tab. It doesn't delete or do anything to the categories that were set up. The dashboard sets them up the same way as all the others. You create a new statutes category down here, are those things that can be used. You move them up here, and it'll start counting or searching for them. So let's say you want to create a DUI. Click on this, give it some sort of icon, search for your DUIs here, grab them, move them up. You can decide that maybe you don't want this one in there, so you can move it back. Okay, so you can adjust it however you would like, save your changes, and now you have the DUI category that will show up when you click on this button. The next one under setup is citations, which is this tab right here. First you have the citation type, whether you want moving, non-moving, by the type of citation or by the statute, so the offense that it was written for. Again, you can show it for everyone, or the individual users can hide it if they'd like. This is the raw data on each of the citations. So you can see what it was written for. You can see the race and things like that. If you do not want the race graphics to appear, you'd click this button. And if you want to show that up is good, you click this button. You save the changes, and when you're done making any changes, just click on Save Changes. First, let's go to Citation Type, Save Changes, go into Citation Groups, and add a category. Here are all the categories that have been found. So we only have moving or non-moving in there, and so you could add, say, parking. You have to give it a title. Save your changes, and now you have parking. So if we were to click up here, it would look for just the moving, the type of citation. Again, you go back to Settings, click on Statutes, which is the offense, save changes. And now go into Groups. And now these are the ones that are set up by the actual statute. So under speeding, you would have the actual statute. You can search for it either by the statute if you wanted all 200s, if you wanted all traffic, say, which 484s, or if you want just one particular type of statute that you would like to create, one particular citation group with the offense codes in it you would like to create. So again, you create a citation group, come over here, decide what you're looking for. Maybe it's DUIs. Drop it down, move it up, give it a title, and save your changes. Oops, already got one. So if you already have one, and you've changed it a little bit, modified it, now we have 2 of them here. Delete those you do not want in there. And now these are the groups that would show up under citations. The next one is the accident settings. There's no setup on accidents. It comes from AC main, so if you have populated it and the default tables are there inside of AC main or the accident module, then it'll automatically pull it up. And what it'll pull up is a lot of different information for you. You know, the normal graphs. It'll pull up killed, injured, and you can change some other things on it, but it works. There's not really any setup on it. The roll call settings. Roll call it can be set by admin, a sergeant, or somebody, and the idea behind it is that the person going out on the road doesn't have to worry about any of these buttons or what they're going to show. They click on roll call. Inside a roll call would be those things that they want additional attention to. So there'd be those things that the admin or the sergeant, like burglaries or vehicle burgs or whatever it is that you decide you'd like your patrol shifts going out to look at, they would put in here. It's the same way as all things. Take them, move them up, give it an icon and a title on it. So that's roll call. The roll call button is just a good, quick way to get in there and look at things. It'll show you know, the information, but it also allows them to map it very quickly. And that's the idea behind roll call, that they can bring it up on the screen, they can look at it and talk about it, and or they can print it out or email it or whatever they'd like. Evidence settings. Over here, sets up exactly the same way. Remember, once you set something up as the manager, set it into memory, and then other users can load it down. So for instance, if I set this into memory, I can look at these and load that information back down to that user, and now they have it. And you can do that on many of the categories, dates, and every one of these buttons, but you have to first set it into memory. Evidence, the evidence groups can show you what's in your evidence room, and so you can see what type of drugs have come in. You can see what's active in your evidence room. You can if you put the amount and the quantity on your drugs, for instance, methamphetamine, 2 grams, you should be able to add those up and therefore give a value of what's come through your evidence room in a certain period based on the dates you've set up. Circumstances, same thing. You set your information into that you have set up here. Oops. And you'll get this load default button. So any user that you want to have it, again, you would load the defaults. You create them in the same way. The selected user, let me back up because we don't want that selected user. We want it in as the manager here. So we'll come back in here and you could set up anything. Let's say that you wanted to know all the situations, all the law incidents that were occurring at schools. So you could just come in here, move it up, give it an icon of something that you can tell what it is if you start mapping these things. Save the changes and it creates that category. Now under circumstances, we'll have two of those categories in there that'll show you circumstances based on what we had set up. The last one's officer settings. We'll do that separately here since it's a entirely different module, and it's sold separately, it's marketed separately, and it's got a lot of other settings in it. So we'll do one for that specifically. This one here is application logging. This will show you every time somebody's logged into this one, what's happened with it. You can do all log entries to see when they've changed things, what was changed, who changed it. Probably the most important is this application testing. It should always be current. This date should always be the current date. This demo box will always use the same dates because we don't update the data. And you shouldn't see any of these red errors. On your dashboard, this would always be current. There'd be no errors on it. And then the about, which will show what version of the dashboard you're on. So that's pretty well the setup on the dashboard.